Have you ever gone through an unexpected turn in life where everything you thought was important suddenly changed? Sometimes, it's in those difficult moments that we discover our true strength, and maybe, even find love. Today we're diving into a story that proves real value isn't in what we have, but in who we allow ourselves to love. If you've ever experienced a life-changing moment or believe that love can transform everything, this story will touch your heart. Join me as we dive into today's story. At the top of the city's skyscrapers, Romeo Carter lived like a king in his untouchable empire. His real estate fortune placed him at the pinnacle of society, where wealth and power seemed to be the only values that mattered. Raised amidst luxury, he believed the world was shaped by control and an unshakable will to win, with no room for weakness or emotion. Surrounded by rare works of art, his mansion reflected not just his success, but his isolation. Everyone around him knew he did not tolerate imperfections, and his employees barely dared to lift their eyes in the presence of their master. It was a typical morning for Romeo when fate decided to take the reins. Sitting at his marble desk, he reviewed financial reports, mentally preparing for the busy day ahead. The walls around him displayed expensive works of art, but to him, they were mere meaningless decorations. At that moment, the news caught his attention with images of a violent protest. The screen showed scenes of families being forcibly removed from their homes, a slum set to be demolished to make way for a new luxury development, one of many projects led by Romeo. He watched in silence, without showing any trace of emotion. To him, it was just business as usual, another obstacle to be overcome in his relentless march toward progress. "Just another bump in the road," he murmured, turning off the television without giving the matter further thought. The protest was nothing that could halt his plans. Romeo always believed that success came to those who worked hard and that opportunities were within everyone's reach. If those people couldn't rise from poverty, it was because they hadn't tried hard enough, he thought. But fate had other plans. Later that day, on his way to an important meeting with international investors, Romeo's car was struck head-on by a runaway vehicle. The impact was brutal. Heavy rain pelted the windows, mixing with the blood dripping from his face. Trapped in the wreckage, he lost consciousness. The man who had always controlled his destiny was now vulnerable, at the mercy of forces he could never control. When Romeo finally woke up, everything had changed. He was in a hospital room, surrounded by machines monitoring every beat of his heart. For a man who had always controlled everything around him, being immobilized and unable to make decisions was humiliating. He found himself powerless, forced to rely on others for even the most basic needs. The irony of his situation did not escape him, but the pride he carried inside prevented him from reflecting more deeply on the circumstances that had brought him there. It was in this moment of complete vulnerability that Alessia entered his life. Alessia was a woman with a strong spirit, yet marked by the harshness of life. Fleeing violence in her homeland, she had come to this country in search of a better future. Working as a housekeeper, Alessia fought every day to support her family, who remained behind, sending every penny she could save to her mother and siblings. She was a woman of few words, but many actions. When Alessia was hired to take care of Romeo and his mansion, he barely noticed her presence. At first, to him, she was just another employee, someone who did her job without complaint. However, as the days passed, Romeo began to notice the quiet figure who moved through the house. Alessia performed her tasks with almost flawless efficiency, but there was something more about her that intrigued him. She was young and very beautiful, possessing a kind of serenity in the face of hardship that he couldn't understand. In the beginning, Romeo treated her with the same coldness he reserved for everyone around him. He was a distant man, trapped in his own world where power and money were the only things that made sense. But Alessia, with her patience and dedication, slowly began to break through the invisible barriers he had built over the years. She wasn't like the other people who passed through his life. There was something in her careful gestures, something in the way she seemed to carry the weight of the world without ever losing her quiet smile. One day, as Alessia was fluffing the pillows on Romeo's bed, he broke the silence that always hung between them and asked, "Do you think people can really change?" Alessia, with her characteristic simplicity, looked him directly in the eyes and responded without hesitation, "Yes, if they have the courage to face the truth about who they really are." Her words echoed in Romeo's mind for days. For the first time, he found himself confronted with an idea he had always avoided, that perhaps his life, built on control and wealth, was an illusion. The days dragged on, and Romeo began to feel an emotional dependency on Alessia that he had never thought possible. Before, he believed that relying on someone was a weakness, but now, confined to that bed, he discovered an invisible strength in being cared for by someone with such dedication. He, who had always considered himself self-sufficient, began to see Alessia not just as an employee, but as a person whose presence brought light to the emptiness of his life. The days slowly passed after the accident, but each one brought a small victory for Romeo. With Alessia's tireless support, his health began to steadily improve. At first, the movements were minimal, a finger that twitched, an attempt to sit up alone, but for Romeo, each progress was a step out of the darkness. Alessia was always by his side, encouraging him to keep going, never allowing him to give up. She became the pillar of strength he so desperately needed. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, Romeo began to walk again. At first, with hesitant steps and a body still frail, but with a determination that only grew. Alessia helped him through every rehabilitation session, her presence a silent but constant comfort. Between exercises, moments of conversation emerged, and in those moments, Romeo came to know a part of the world he had never noticed before, Alessia's world. She spoke lovingly about her distant family, about the longing she felt, and the sacrifices she made to support those she loved. And Romeo, for the first time in years, truly listened. He began to see beyond the surface, realizing how special she was, not just for her strength and resilience, but for the generous heart she carried. The man who once cared only about success and power now found meaning in the small things, in the words exchanged, in the moments shared. As his body grew stronger, so did the connection between them. It was no longer just Alessia helping Romeo walk. Now they walked together, side by side, talking about everything and nothing. With each step, with each passing day, Romeo felt something different growing inside him, something he couldn't define at first. But little by little, what he once confused with gratitude began to transform into something deeper. One day, as the sun began to set on the horizon, they decided to take a walk through the mansion's gardens. The cool afternoon air surrounded them, and there was a peace in the atmosphere that made the moment unique. Romeo was stronger now, and for the first time in months, he felt as if his life was returning to normal. But now that normal had a new meaning, one that had everything to do with Alessia. They walked in silence for a while until they reached a part of the garden where the flowers bloomed in every possible color. Alessia, without saying a word, stopped to admire the view. Romeo, on the other hand, couldn't take his eyes off her. The sparkle in Alessia's eyes as she gazed at the flowers, the soft smile that lit up her face, it left him breathless. Without thinking much, Romeo took a step closer and said, almost in a whisper, "I never imagined someone like you could enter my life and change it like this." Alessia turned to him, surprised. She saw the sincerity in Romeo's eyes, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. "You were the reason for all of this, Alessia. For me walking again, for me wanting to be a better person." Before he could say more, Romeo took another step toward her, his breath quickening, and his heart pounding. Alessia felt the weight of his words, and though she didn't want to admit it, something inside her had changed too. She no longer saw him as the cold, distant man she had once known, but as someone who had allowed himself to transform. And then, without another word, Romeo slowly leaned in and kissed her. It was a soft kiss, full of unspoken feelings, a gesture that sealed months of closeness, affection, and understanding. For a moment, they both got lost in that kiss, letting everything around them disappear. When Romeo's lips pulled away, he whispered against hers, "I've fallen in love with you, Alessia." Those words were spoken with a depth she didn't expect but somehow already knew. Alessia remained silent, still absorbing the moment, and then with a shy smile she replied, "I have too." They looked at each other for a long moment, without needing to say anything more. Time seemed suspended, and what had begun as a journey of physical recovery had now transformed into something far more meaningful. Romeo had found, in the midst of pain and vulnerability, the purest feeling he never expected to discover: love. This inner transformation led Romeo to reconsider many of the decisions he had made throughout his career, especially the real estate project that was about to displace hundreds of families. During a crucial meeting with his partners, Romeo did something he had never done before. He requested the demolition project be cancelled. His partners were shocked. The idea of losing millions on a project that was already well underway seemed absurd to them, but Romeo stood firm in his decision. For the first time, he realized the weight of the lives that would be destroyed by his choices. The news of the demolition's cancellation spread quickly throughout the community. That same night, the community leader gathered hundreds of people to protest against the demolitions. The streets were filled with signs, and the atmosphere was one of resistance. What no one expected was that Romeo Carter, the man who was once seen as the villain, would appear at the scene. Dressed simply, Romeo walked alongside Alessia to the center of the crowd. Suspicious and surprised glances fell upon him. The community leader approached, ready to confront him, but before he could say anything, Romeo spoke, "I've cancelled the demolition." A heavy silence fell over the crowd, followed by an explosion of applause and shouts of relief. Romeo's words brought unexpected hope to those people, who had recently seen him as the symbol of their home's destruction. Alessia, watching from afar, couldn't hold back her tears. The man she had cared for, the one who once embodied everything she feared, now stood with the people, sacrificing his fortune for what was right. Romeo had changed, but this change would never have been possible without Alessia's silent strength and compassion. Over time, the relationship between Romeo and Alessia deepened. The respect that had grown between them evolved into something stronger, something that transcended the social barriers that once separated them. Alessia, with her resilience and compassionate view of the world, continued to inspire Romeo to be a better man, someone who cared for the people around him, and not just for profit. They began to build a future together, a future where power and wealth were no longer the only measures of success. Romeo realized that true wealth lay in human connections, in the lives he touched through his choices. Alongside Alessia, he found a new purpose, something far greater than he had ever imagined. Romeo and Alessia's story showed that even in the darkest moments, love can bloom in unexpected ways. The man who once lived only for power and control found, in Alessia's simple gestures and compassion, the true essence of life. They turned pain into opportunity, suffering into redemption, and together, they built a new future. In the end, destiny had shown that love is the most powerful pillar of all healing. If you enjoyed the story of Romeo and Alessia, don't forget to leave a like so we can keep bringing more content like this. And feel free to comment below on what you loved most about this journey of transformation and love. Your support is crucial for our channel's growth and motivates us to create more unforgettable stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.